Hi everyone, I'm Angie. Welcome to Make It Monday. Today we're going to make a set of floral note cards using items you can find around your house to paint some spring flowers. So these are the two cards that we're going to make today. We are going to start with this hydrangea card first, so I'm going to set this one aside. All right, so what you're going to need for this one is a circle or something that you can trace. So I just cut out 2 circles out of white paper, and then you're going to need some small bubble wrap. You don't want it to be popped bubble wrap. This won't work as well with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take and trace these circles onto the back side of the bubble wrap. It's just much easier to trace, so just take your circle. And I'm just using a Sharpie marker just because I think it'll be easier to see. So you're going to take and trace right around that circle. Sometimes your marker gets stuck a little bit so that you have a circle. And then you're going to take your scissors and cut that out. So I went ahead and did that ahead of time. And I have 2 circles out of bubble wrap here. So because we need to handle these circles, I stuck a piece of Scotch tape on the back that I can stick my fingers through there. It just helps me hold on to it. So I'm going to do that with this other one. I'm going to get a little piece of Scotch tape. And it's just to make it a little bit easier to hold on to. All right, so we have our bubble wrap ready. The next thing that we need to do is to get our cardstock ready. So I'm going to set the card aside here. And you need a piece of white cardstock, and I cut this to 4 by 5 1/4. The cardstock that I'm using is called mixed media paper. It's a really heavy cardstock that is meant to hold up to using with paint. You can use just regular cardstock, just make sure that it's 80 or 90 pounds or above that. So in cardstock, the higher the number, the heavier the paper. So you'll need your piece of white paper, and then you will need some acrylic paint. So I've got my acrylic paint all set up here. We're going to do a pink hydrangea today, so therefore I've got some red acrylic paint, and we don't need much of that, and then quite a bit of white paint. The other thing we're going to need are some Q-tips. So we are going to, let me just get my cheat sheet here. We are going to mix up our paint. So hopefully I've got that in the frame enough. We're going to take some white paint and just a dab of this red paint. It's always easier to add more color than to take it away. So I always start with just a little bit first. That's just a little bit light for me, so I'm going to pick up a little bit more of that red, and I'm going to mix it in. And I'm just using a flat acrylic paintbrush here. Okay. Nope, I still want it to be a little bit darker, so just a tad more red in there. There we go, that's a little bit more to my liking. Okay, so you're going to take your bubble wrap, and if you put it on your hands a little bit, there we go. I got my tape is sticking to the sides, it's not laying flat. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to just paint this right onto my bubble wrap. And basically we're going to use the bubble wrap like a stamp. Get my sides up there because I want this all the way to the edges. And don't worry if you get paint, kind of down in between the bubble wrap. You don't want a lot of paint down in there. Okay, so as you can see, I've got my bubble wrap pretty well covered. Now I'm going to take my bubble wrap, and this is basically where I'm going to position my flowers. So this is going to kind of give us our flower base. And I'm just going to take that, slide my fingers out, and just press that bubble wrap right on to my paper. And then I'm going to slide my fingers back in there and I'm just going to pick it straight up. And your bubble wrap can be washed off, it can be reused. Okay, I'm going to straighten this one out and then we're going to do another one. Looks like I got to mix up just a little bit more paint here. And we're going to do the smaller one. Actually, what I'm going to do is press that tape down and then just stick it out there. That's better. Just stick it onto my fingers instead of sticking my fingers through the tape. All right, now we're going to paint this one. And I want this positioned kind of up in the corner here, but not too far because I want to be able to get some leaves up in there too. So again, I'm going to take and press my bubble wrap down. And then pick it up. Okay, so that is the base part of our flowers. Now, what we're going to do is I want a little bit darker shade of red. And that's going to be the bottom half of our flowers. I got so much paint on my paintbrush here, I need to squish some off of there. Okay. Now I'm going to take a Q-tip and I'm going to take 3 of them here. And I'm going to kind of just hold them together so they kind of form a triangle like that. And I'm going to dip that into the paint. And this is going to be my base part down at the bottom. So this is going to end up being a little bit darker, and I'm going to just twist and turn and get some more paint on my Q-tips. And you just want to pounce straight up and down. And I'm just twisting and turning. And now I'm going to do my smaller flower up towards the top. And again, reposition my Q-tips a little bit. And I'm going to twist and turn. So we've got a little bit of a darker shade in there. And you can go outside your circle. You just want to kind of keep it somewhat. Now I'm going to switch down to just 1. Because then I have a little bit more control about where these are going to go. I'm going to pick up a little bit more of this. Okay, now I'm going to start making a lighter shade. So I'm going to pick up more white and I'm just going to add it to what I had there. And this is going to make a lighter shade of pink. Try and squish some of this off my brush here. Actually, there. Okay, so I'm going to start with the fresh side of a Q-tip, just using the back side. And now I'm going to start coming in the middle and adding more dots of the acrylic paint right over the pink in the middle area. And we're eventually going to work our way all the way into just straight white. So I am going to add just a few of these light pink ones towards the top just to kind of fill that area in just a little bit. I don't want to do it too much. Okay, so now here I'm going to go into that other hydrangea kind of in the middle area, going a little bit over those darker ones that I did just to lighten them up a little bit. But I don't want to go all the way down to the bottom. I want to leave this pink shade more in the middle. Okay, that's looking pretty good. All right, I'm going to set that Q-tip aside, and I'm going to grab and use the bottom side of one of these other ones. And now I'm going to just strictly go into the white paint. So I'm going to pick up just the white paint. And I'm going to do the white paint up on the top edge. So think about in nature when the sun is shining. You'll get your shadows and your light areas on your flowers. That's what we're trying to create by doing a darker tone, a mid-tone, and a light tone. And you can overwork these too, so the tendency is to know when to stop, because they can get too overdone. Okay, I think that one's done. Now I'm going to take and bring the white shade up into this one. And I'm just doing about the top third, and I'm trying to kind of round it a little bit as I'm adding these. All right. Let's see. So I think that looks pretty good for the most part. I'm going to just add a couple, and you can take the white outside of your area a little bit as well. And if your paint gets, or your Q-tip gets a little too mushy, you can always just take a clean Q-tip and keep going with this. There. Okay, so now this needs to get set aside to dry. The other thing I'm going to mention before I forget is you can take, if you'll notice on mine here, I took my paintbrush and in these areas right here, I just picked up some paint and just dotted it kind of around the outside just to kind of soften those edges. So what I did is I just took a round paintbrush and I got it damp and then pinched off most of the water. And I'm just going to pick up some of this light shade that we have here. And I'm going to take my paintbrush and going just kind of straight up and down. I'm just going to add little dots here and there. It just kind of softens that edge. I like to go in odd numbers, so I usually do this in 3s. So we're going to just add. And if you kind of think of a triangle, it's just kind of pleasing to the eye. I think odd numbers just work better. And you can do just some single dots too if you want, just to kind of add in a little bit extra. I'm going to add some to the top one as well. You just don't want them to be too big. They're supposed to just be kind of light and airy. There, I think that does it. Okay, so I'm going to clean up this a little bit. We're going to set this aside to dry, and we're going to do the flowers for the next card. So I'll be back in just a little bit. Okay, we are set to work on the next flowers for the next card. So this is what I call the Dandelion Card, just because these white puffy flowers look like dandelions. What we're going to use to make these is a straw. So I'm going to set this aside for a moment. So I found these big straws, and I like these because it makes it easier, you'll understand in just a minute, to actually cut them. So what I did is I took one of these big straws and I cut it in half. And then on the cut end, where they're not, because sometimes they're uneven where you cut. So on the ends that I didn't cut, we're going to take and draw a marker line. So what I did is I measured 1 inch up. So one of the squares of my mat is 1 inch. And I just held a marker there and just spun it. I just need a guideline. And then the other one I did at the 1/2 inch mark. So you spin your straw and you just make a 1/2 inch mark. Then what you're going to do, and you need a fine point scissors to do this with, you're going to take your scissors and cut up to that line. And you're just going to keep making cuts all the way around your straw. And you want them to be fairly thin. The thinner they are, the thinner your petals will be. And so you just keep going around like that until you've got something that looks like this. So then what I did is I took and I pushed them back a little bit. So you can see that it's going to look like this. And then the smaller one looks like this. So these are your 2-size flowers. So what we're going to do with these, this we're going to use black cardstock. This is just regular black cardstock, heavy weight. And then just white acrylic paint. Now you can do these flowers in colors if you want. Because we were going to work on black paper and I really liked the white fuzzy looking, that's what I went with. So I have some white acrylic paint on my plastic mat here, and I'm going to just kind of spread it out a little bit with my paintbrush, because what we're going to do is dip this straw into the paint. So I need it big enough and wide enough to dip this into. The other thing that's handy to have is a paper towel in case you get too much paint. Like I've got a lot of paint here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pounce this in. And if my paint looks kind of gloppy, what I'm going to do is pounce it off once on my paper towel. And be careful because you'll end up with paint everywhere. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just, I'm going to dab. I got some globs on the back side. I'm just going to dab those off on my paper towel. See, there was some bigger globs there. Okay, so you're just going to pounce this, twisting it back and forth to create your flower. And you just keep pouncing until you have something that you like. I like that, so I'm going to stop. Now, if you want some more definition to that, you can dip back into your paint. Now, this time my paint is not as gloppy. So I'm going to do just a couple pounces, just enough to give those petals a little definition. And so now we're going to do a second flower with this. And again, I've got my paint spread out a little bit so it's not quite so gloppy. And I'm going to do another one right here. And you just keep spinning that straw until you get that the way you want it. And I like that. I'm going to do one more pounce into my paint a little bit and just to get a couple of definition lines in there. And then I'm just going to let it go. And then these can be washed, so I'm just going to dump this into my water to get the paint off. Now I'm going to come in with my little one and do a little one up on top here. So yeah, what's nice about these is once you make them, you can use them over and over again. So I'm just going to do a little one up towards the top here. And I'm not even going to go in a second time. I'm just going to leave it just like that. And then I'm going to take that and just dunk it in my water. Now I'm going to show you my card here. Just a sec. I got to get my paintbrush cleaned off. So on my card, you'll see that I've got stems coming all the way into the center. I did that with a paintbrush. The straw is always going to leave a center area. So if you want, and you can leave it like that, you don't have to do this part, but I just wanted to show you how I did this. So I'm just getting a light amount of paint on my paintbrush, and I'm going to kind of just put a dot in the center so I know I've got something to aim for. And then I'm going to just take and pull in the different directions and just kind of drag that out into the other painted area. And that's just going to kind of fill in that center a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing with this one, except for my paint is a little bit thick on there. I don't want my paint super thick because I want it to match kind of how the straw came out. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the little one. Just kind of put a dot of paint in the center. And then just take and draw lines out. Hopefully my hand's not too much in the way here. I'm trying to do this so that you guys can still see what's going on here. Okay, I'm going to rinse my paintbrush a little bit, and then just to give that center a little bit more definition, I'm going to come in with I'm going to use the back end of my paintbrush. So if you dip the back end of your paintbrush in a little bit of paint, it makes really nice little dots. So I'm just going to put a dot there, and that's just going to kind of define the center of the flower. So yeah, back end of your paintbrush works really great for this. All right, so that is the dandelion flowers. All right, so again, I'm going to clean up a little bit, and then we're going to come back and do leaves on both of the flower stems. So I'll be back. Okay, we are now set to do our leaves. So this is what I did with my leaves, and I'm going to show you a little bit how I got to that. When drawing leaves, and I am no artist, the easiest way I have found to do that, here, let me get a pen because I think it'll show it better on the camera, is I'll draw a straight line with my paintbrush, and then I'll take some paint and bring it up, and then take some paint and bring it down on that side. So when you have that straight line, that just gives you something to work off of. So if I was going to do another leaf off of that, I would draw a straight line this way, then just take and bring my paint down this way, and take and bring my paint down that way. So hopefully this will make sense and it'll make it fairly easy. So I'm going to set that aside. Now, if you're uncomfortable, I usually just freehand with my paintbrush. If you're uncomfortable doing that, go ahead and draw it with a pencil. I would draw it very lightly, but then you can control kind of where your leaves are going to go, and your acrylic paint will cover up the pencil line. So for the leaves, what we're going to do is I've got a dot of light green acrylic paint, a dot of ochre paint, and quite a bit of white. And we don't need much of the green or the ochre. So again, we're going to take, and I'm going to just separate my white out a little bit. I should have just made it into two piles. And I'm going to pick up with my smaller paintbrush, I'm going to pick up a dot of ochre and a dollop of green. And like I said, you can always add, you can always add more color, but you can't take it away. So yeah, that's too light for what I want. So I'm going to add quite a bit more green. There we go. And what the ochre does is it works a little bit like a brown in a way that I didn't want this green quite so bright. So it just tones it down and makes it a little bit more of a leaf green. Okay, I'm going to rinse my brush off because I don't want quite that amount of paint on my brush when I start my leaves. Okay, so I'm going to kind of pinch the paintbrush so that the end of my brush is kind of in a point. Okay, so I'm going to pick up some of this paint and I want a leaf up here. So I'm going to draw that line with my paintbrush and just kind of let it swish off the end. Then I'm going to take and draw my line up this way. And I'm going to draw my line down here. Now I can start to fill in. So I want my lighter shade on the top. So I'm just going to fill that in with my lighter shade. Then I'm going to pick up a little bit of the dark green and a little bit of this. And I'm going to just spread that on the bottom half. And again, you can always add more color, but you can't take it away. So I want that bottom half to be just a little bit greener, so I'm going to pick up just a little bit more. And I'm just going to kind of let that color blend right on the paper. And I usually use that, that imaginary center line as my point where I want the two to kind of so then I'm just going to blend together. All I did is just clean my paintbrush off of a little bit of the paint to just blend them together. Now I'm going to rinse my brush, dry it off on my paper towel, pinch it back a little bit, and I'm going to do the next leaf. So I'm going to just spin my paper a little bit, and I want this leaf to kind of curl off this direction. So I'm going to again draw that line in the center, bring that down, bring this down, and it can go into this leaf. And you don't want a ton of paint on your paintbrush because then everything just gets gloppy. The other thing I want to talk about is the paints just a little bit. There are acrylic paints that are a little bit more transparent, so you can see through them a little bit, and then there's paints that dry matte. I'm using a white paint that dries matte, and the others are more translucent. We bought new paint at the library, and they were a little bit more translucent than I wanted them to be. And for some things, like the white flowers that we did, being translucent is okay, because I liked that that was more transparent. But for these leaves, I wanted them to stand out a little bit. Okay, so we got 2 leaves there. We're not going to worry about the detail of the leaves just yet. We're going to just let those dry. We're going to work on our other leaves. So I'm going to come down here, and I want kind of a leaf down in this corner. So again, I'm going to draw my line. I'm going to come around, get a little bit more paint, and come around there. So now I'm going to just pick up some paint and fill it in. And if it looks like your paint is kind of skipping a little bit, it could be because your paintbrush is too dry. So just rinse your paintbrush and then dap it off again, get most of the water out of it. And just remember, in nature, nothing is perfect. So do not be, worried that, oh, my leaves are not perfect. Things in nature are not perfect. All right. So I'm going to add my lighter lighter shades. Now I'm going to rinse my brush because it's getting a little dry. Tap it off, pinch my ends so they're more in a point, and I'm going to pick up some of that dark green while this paint is still wet. And paint blends really easy when it's wet like this. So that's why I try to do this before it's dry. You always can go back on top once the paint is dry and add more color if you want. That's kind of the beauty of acrylic paint, is you can always go back in, cover it up. All right. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of detail to this top one, and then I'm going to let this go for now, and we're going to work on the leaves for the other one. So this, I'm going to pick up just a tad of the dark green, and I'm just going to kind of add my line down the center again. And again, for this one, I'm going to do that same thing. I'm just going to add that line down the center again. And then the other thing is, because this leaf I want to look like it's behind, I'm going to add just a little bit of a shade line here. And I'm going to rinse my brush off. And I'm going to just kind of blend that out just a little bit in the same, my paintbrush is too wet there. I'm just going to sop up that water with my paintbrush once it's dry. And I'm going to just, the beauty of doing this right in front of people. But that's all right. It all works out. Okay, now I'm just going to blend that. I got just kind of a hard edge there, so I'm going to just kind of blend that out just a little bit. Okay. So you kind of get the idea for those leaves, and I'll bring my original card back in. So I've got leaves, you know, all around. There was some space in between, so I just added a little bit of what would be green stem, and add leaves all the way around. So you can put as many leaves or as little leaves as you want. And like I said, if you're unsure about where to put them, draw them in with a pencil. You can always erase it. So go ahead and do that with those. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to bring this one back in because we're going to use the same colors. So this one, especially when you're painting on dark paper, that matte finish paint is really kind of important. So this one, they're actually pretty easy. I'm going to rinse my brush off, and it's very similar to the other one in that it's just basically a longer version. So I've got like my stem. Let me set that off to the side here. So all I did is I drew my line, but my lines coming back are a lot thinner. So I basically am doing the same process, but just with a longer line and a skinnier leaf like that. So it's going to be similar to that when you do it with your paintbrush. So the first thing I do is I kind of figure out, okay, where are my stems coming down from and where are they going to? And then at the bottom, we're just going to create some leaves. So I know I want one stem coming from this flower down into here. So then you have to imagine that that stem is actually going to come all the way down. And then this flower here, this stem could come straight down, and then this one could curve a little bit. So that's kind of what I'm going to aim for. So I've got my clean paintbrush here. Pinch off the water. I'm going to pick up my lighter paint again. And I'm just going to draw that line for this stem. Now that's a little bit light for me for these. So I'm actually going to take some of that darker green and mix it in again, because I want this to be just a little bit darker than the leaves on the other card. All right, I'm going to rinse my brush. Dry it off, pinch it off. Okay, now I'm going to come in with the darker green, and I can go right over the top of this. That's a little bit better. Okay, so before I make that stem come all the way down, I'm going to add in the stems for these. So I'm actually going to make this one come off the side, and I'm just going to bring it down. Even if you don't cover paint all the way down, it kind of just gives you an idea that you know where you're going with this. So I'm going to come in with a little bit more paint and bring that all the way down. And then this one, let's see, I kind of want them to come down and bunch in the center like I did on here. So this one's going to come just more this direction. Okay, so now I'm going to clean off my brush again. And I don't even think I'm going to bring that stem down. I'm just going to leave that as is. Okay, so now we're going to work on the leaves for this. And so for this one, I want one leaf kind of up about a little ways down. And I'm going to just kind of curve that as I go and get more paint on my paintbrush. Now I'm going to take and join it there, but I'm not going to go real wide. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And then I'm going to kind of just fill it in. And the black paper, you might have to do 2 coats with your leaves, just because that dark paper I lost a little bit of my definition at the top there, so I'm just going to take that. I had a little glob of paint there, I just kind of drew that up. And now I'm going to pick up a little bit of the straight darker green, and I'm going to just kind of blend that in on the bottom half there. Alright, now I want another leaf kind of down here a little ways. It's not going to be as big a leaf. It's just going to be a small leaf like that. And again, I'm going to pick up a little bit of darker green and just kind of put it on that base side there. And then my stem is getting a little bit light now that it's dried, so I'm going to put just another coat over that stem and bring that down. Okay, now I'm going to show you how I did the grass. And the grass is actually really pretty easy. All I did is take my paintbrush and then push to flatten it out again and then lift it up a little bit to get grass. And it's okay if there is some light spots in there. You're just gonna, you have to just let it be what it's gonna be. And drag that up. Okay, my paintbrush is getting a little dry, so I'm gonna get that a little bit moist again. And I'm going to I need one more leaf on this other stem. So I'm going to take this and draw in my leaf. Just fill that in a little bit. And once the paint dries too, it also becomes more matte. So it's gonna fill in a little bit. Like I said, you can always go back in and add more paint over the top. So I'm gonna just keep that down towards the base. The stem is a little bit thin here on the bottom, so I'm going to come up from the bottom because I don't want it to get too thick. I'm just going to drag that back up into there. Okay, now that I've got that leaf in there, then now I can add more grass. And the grass can come up over the other one. But it's pretty much just press your brush and just lift it up. And you can add some grass off to the side there. And I'm going to add some more, kind of just down in this area, just so that it fills that area in a little bit. And then once you have it the way you want it, you can just stop. One more in there. Okay, there we go. All right. So now once you've got everything painted and you're just going to let it dry, then we're ready to assemble the cards. So in your kit you will have, let me find my extra pieces here. You'll have a white card base that's already folded for you. All you're going to do is either take like a glue stick or some double stick tape, take your flower, and this card is cut just slightly bigger than your paper, and you're just going to mount it on there like that. And then there is a die cut that says thanks, which looks like this. And you're just going to take some liquid glue, or again a glue stick. You have to be careful with the glue stick that you don't get glue caught in all those little nooks and crannies. And you're just going to glue that right on there like that. For the Hydrangea card, I'm just going to grab this one. You'll have a black card base. So again, you'll take your Hydrangea card that you made and mount it right on your black card base with some double stick tape again, or glue stick. There is a white piece for the inside of your card. That is so that you can write a personal message in there. It's a little hard to write on black paper, so we put white paper in there for you. And then there is also a die cut sentiment that you can put on this at the bottom. And again, just use some liquid glue and glue that in place. And so your note cards are finished. So I hope you had fun with this. I hope you learned how to make some fun things using just items you can find around your house. Q-tips, bubble wrap, straws. So that is it for today's Make It Monday. Again, thank you for joining me. I hope you had a good time, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.